good morning in the Caribbean, good afternoon in Europe. My name is Noam. Happy to be with you, and thank you very much for taking the time to watch this webinar. Hopefully it's going to be interesting for you. First of all, I want to say a general statement. I think that as coming from an industry as water and sanitation, which has a long history, almost as long as humanity, we should look also back what happened in last pandemics and how they affected the water and sanitation industry. And actually, if you look back and you see what generated modern water and sanitation in the largest, most important cities in the world, like Paris or London, it was the cholera pandemic that generated actually a huge change towards a better world in terms of water supply and wastewater treatment, etc., etc. So not all is negative. This is my first thing, and I hope that I can demonstrate that we can do some interesting things at these difficult times. So I'll just start with the presentation, and I'll repeat a bit some things, and so I'll go through them very, very fast. I think the significant, I would like to start with the main challenges that I see in the Caribbean. I don't live in the Caribbean, but I've been working with the Caribbean for many years. It's, let's say, a second home for us. So we are worried about the general macroeconomical impact of COVID-19 on economies that are dependent mostly on tourism. If you would see on this chart, you can see that, for example, Bahamas, 56% of employment is people working in tourism, 30% in Jamaica, 40% in Barbados, 10%, which is also a huge amount in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is going to create a huge stress economically on the economies of the Caribbean, as island economies dependent on tourism. And this is what we need to deal with. In addition, in general, Caribbean utilities are in a difficult place to begin with, okay? Not all of them, but a lot of them are stressed financially and operationally. And as this is an essential service, and this is a time that we can actually show to our governments, to our stakeholders, including our clients, how actually important is a water system. Hand washing is the cheapest, most reliable way to deal with the spread of COVID and other illnesses. Water supply 24/7 is not a luxury, is a must, okay? And the challenge increases because of consumption reduction, which is 5-7%, I would say in average globally, but can be much worse in the Caribbean, again, because of specific economical measures and situations, and political measures such as freezing tariff increases or avoiding disconnections. Also, we will have less government funds available due to the economical conditions. What I want to say here, I think the main message from this is, first of all, as water professionals, this is actually, in a way, an opportunity for us to show that our employees, our companies, are heroes. They are like the guys that go to the hospital to treat people, or the police. They are guys going out to the field to make sure you have water to wash your hands. So we actually can generate more respect to our industry, more value in terms of social value and perceived value. What I would like to say about the political measure, which is absolutely understandable under the context, I just want to say one thing. I don't think water utilities are the right organizations and the right entities to be the ones that take the social role in society. I don't think a water company is the best way to distribute wealth. You have tax, you have welfare, you have other systems that you should support the people that are poor and that cannot pay for water, but it doesn't need to fall, from at least from my perception on the shoulders of a water utility that is dealing with a huge crisis in any case. So you don't want to add to that crisis. The social security, services are much more proficient in giving money to needy people than a water company is proficient with dealing with reduction of tariff for specific individuals. We have less tools, and we're not. It shouldn't come on the, let's say, on the expense of the water companies, because they are an essential part of the economy, and they are an essential part of fighting this pandemic. So these are the challenges that I see. Some good news. Water is probably one of the least affected industries and sectors in the world. And even in comparison to other utilities, if you compare water to electricity, for example, the reduction in electricity supply is much sharper than water supply, which makes water more and more attractive. Why? Because it is a rigid consumption utility. Imagine comparing water utility to any other infra asset that we're talking about. Most infra assets are exposed to some extent, at least, to consumption. In water, this is much more rigid, much more manageable. And because the water service is usually the cheapest utility that people consume, we think that it makes the attractiveness of water utilities even stronger than before. Because if you compare it now to a toll road or to a electricity utility, a water utility is more resilient, more attractive for financiers and for other people wanting to get involved in this business. I think that one thing that we learn is that reliance on local staff, training and knowledge transfer, which was always important for us. You can see that most of the places we operate, we have almost 100% local staff. Is becoming more and more and more important in today's world. I think the idea that some projects, the concepts that some projects include of massive replacement of manpower, bringing a lot of expats in, is false in this world that we live in today. With travel restrictions, etc., we must be able to train the local. There are many, of course, beyond Corona, there are many advantages to that, but we need to rely and we need to focus on local workforce and local capabilities and build them strongly. So even a small economy can have the resilience to deal with their own issues without being dependent on the outside. I think that some operation aspects will be more digitalized and will start being pushed stronger and stronger. Something such a shock to the system, I would say, to the general economical system, always accelerates trends. And I think that one trend that is accelerating around the world is more remote operations and better digital process of the commercial processes that we have. So I think that water utilities from this experience of Corona will make sure to learn, and I hope that they will do that, how much you can improve on the one side, your operation as a utility, your efficiency, your water losses, both physical or commercial, and how you can improve the customer relationship if you introduce some technology and digital processes to that. There is actually, in most of the world today, no need for a person to actually walk into an office to pay a bill or to deal with an invoice. I would say that even in relatively poor countries, the access of 3G, 4G smartphones is enormous. So the vast majority of the population can access services remotely, and that can improve the results of water utilities. And that is very important in the road to becoming a more resilient water utility. The basis of efficiency is absolutely non-revenue water, especially in the Caribbean. If you don't have your non-revenue water issues solved, the rest is like trying to install very high-end software into a system of a very old car. You know, if you take the navigation system of a Mercedes and you put it into a car you bought in 1985, it's not going to change anything. It's going to be the same car with a fancy dashboard. So first, before we plug the technology in, and of course this is something that you can do in parallel, we need to work on the basic, and the basic is to have sufficient water supply. I won't go into the full details of that because I guess Roland will speak about that a bit in further detail after this. But just to highlight, this is very possible. We've done that in many places in the world. The possibility to reduce massively non-revenue water and save costs and increase inflows of cash for the water utility is there. Financing, at least in the Caribbean, is there. There is I would say, an appetite, both from the Inter-American Development Bank and other development banks in the region to finance. But even in cases that does not exist, I think that we have the obligation to try to create alternatives for that. I'm going to skip a bit the details of the non-revenue water process and lead you to a subject that is a lesser known enemy, I would say, which is commercial efficiency. Commercial efficiency is a very simple concept. It's how much money you're able to put in your pocket from the operations of your water utility. And I have to say, this is not cynical in any way, and this is not unique to a private water utility. All water utilities, if they do not control their commercial system well, they lose a huge amount of money. And that money, in turn, is not available to be invested in the water system, in the actual physical network. That deteriorates. And then it is a vicious cycle that is very hard to get out of. So one of the basic holes that we need to plug is not only the holes in the actual water network, it's the holes in our wallet, in the company's wallets that leak money. If we don't complete this aspect of the business, if we don't treat it in a professional manner, we can lose a huge amount of actual cash, because people a lot of times talk in revenue terms, but then you can see many utilities that have huge issues with collections of the invoices. So it's nice that you invoice and you invoice correctly, but you need the money in the bank. And governments, I hope, will understand that a resilient water company is a water company that has sufficient profitability to deal with crises. This is something that we need to convey always, and I'm not talking only about politicians, to the population, the value of the service and why this service has to be something that can survive financial and economical shocks. The main principles of modernizing the commercial system are available already. You can outsource the commercial department, you can bring private sector financing to this, and you can modernize your full water meter park to a remote ultrasonic meter. This is all available. The thing is how to tailor make it per utility, but it's highly possible. This is the message. Again, I will not, in the considering time, I will not go into every aspect of how you can improve your commercial processes, but essentially, we know how to do that. The private sector knows how to. I'm not talking only about Miya. In general, the private sector knows how to treat these issues and knows how to make sure that you pay only when you have a suitable return on your investment, and that's a key aspect of that. How to finance improvement, and with that I will try to wrap up the issue. Projects are very hard to finance in general. Short-term projects are very unattractive for financing entities. Why? They're complex for banks to analyze. They don't understand them. The cash flow security level is low unless there is an international organization that is, providing the money. And it's very hard for banks to understand how can they step into the project if something goes wrong. An infra asset, a long-term infra asset, is something that you can finance easily and relatively cheaply. To do that, you have to have some things. You have to have suitable tariff, a suitable guarantee. You have to have the contractor assume responsibility on these aspects. But what is a bit of I would say, no, it's not a paradox, but it's just a thing that is really happening in the world today. You have governments having less and less money to deploy in water and wastewater. The financing gap is increased, and private money is cheaper than ever. This is something that people need to also take into consideration. We are in an all-time low of cheap money. The interest rates all over the world are very low, and they are not going to jump anytime soon, which means this is an opportunity to finance cheaply. Like, it's a good time to take a mortgage when the interest rates are low. It's the same. Fixed income players do not have pension funds, etc. They do not have the old ways to make money, and infra is very, very attractive to them. So you can actually, everyone that manages, owns a water utility, it is a good time to see how they can improve that water utility with relatively very cheap money from the private sector or from IFIs, of course. But I think it's almost unprecedented time in history to do that. So hope we will take advantage of that situation, and with all the sadness and the disaster that we're experiencing, to see also a ray of light and hope that we will evolve as an industry from this situation. And as I know, the Caribbean islands, they are amongst the most resilient people in the world. They go through natural disasters, unfortunately, quite often. And I'm sure nothing, including COVID-19, will break their spirits. So I'm going to be very positive, and I think that the Caribbean water sector will flourish in the near future, hopefully. Thank you very much.